Oh, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Hopefully the mic comes out better this time. I'll listen after. I actually ordered the wire from Amazon, so that should be coming soon. I think that's been the main source of my problems with the mic. So I think that should be here in a day or two. We'll see when that gets here. But yeah, I'll definitely check this before I make it public. A really late upload, so you'll probably waking up in the morning to see this video. I'm going to go live tomorrow because tomorrow there'll be a lot more to talk about because you figure that there's going to be some additions around the league with the New York Giants specifically. That's what we're going to be focused in on as the Giants fill out their practice squad. They'll probably make a couple of waiver acquisitions, but some news definitely came out today for the New York Giants. Before we get into the roster, we'll talk about the trade. Joe Schoen continues to remain super active as the Giants picked up Boogie Basham, which I think is a really good pickup. I remember I liked him coming out in the draft. A lot of people are saying he's Jihad Ward Jr., but that's kind of what the Giants need. They need depth on that D-line off the edge. That's what he provides. He's a big upgrade over Timon Fox and O'Shane Ximenez, both of whom were left off the roster. We'll talk about it as we go along, but it's kind of what we need. And last year, a big weakness of this team was our run defense off the edge. That's what I think Basham will bring to this team. So I think that was a good pickup for the Giants as they just continue to improve this defense. You think about all the depth now that Joe Schoen has added between that and, of course, the Isaiah Simmons trade, and Schoen just continues to show you how active he is with this team. So I thought that was a really nice pickup by Schoen. And, of course, him and Dable have a lot of familiarity with him. In terms of how big of an impact he'll have, we'll see. We all remember the last Buffalo Bill that we picked up, Isaiah Hodgins. That worked out pretty well. So we'll see what Basham could do for this defense. I don't expect him to start, obviously, being that we have Azeez Ojulari and Kayvon Thibodeau, and we have a lot of depth there, at the linebacking core. But I like the move. I think he could be a big contributor for this team. So we'll start there and talk about how much we like that move. Now we'll get into the roster. There were definitely a few minor surprises, and I don't want to read too much into this because I think there's going to be a lot more additions in the coming days. You'll probably see 3 or 4 changes, whether it be, Cole Beasley, for example. They said that they're going to bring him on the practice squad. I wouldn't even be shocked if he suits up week 1 if he's healthy and they feel Wan'Dell's not ready to go. We'll see how it all plays out. There's going to be a lot of shifting, a lot of maneuvering with this roster. So read into this what you will. But we'll start with the quarterback. That was obvious. Jones and Taylor, as I said in my video, as every Giants content creator said, I'm sure, that was the most obvious thing. DeVito, I think, will clear through waivers. At the end of the day, he was an undrafted quarterback. There's a lot of other quarterbacks that got released. Bailey Zappi, for example, who actually showed pretty good production with the Patriots last year. He'll probably be claimed. I think he'll seep through. I think we'll probably bring back DeVito on the practice squad tomorrow, but that remains to be seen. But Jones and Taylor, that was obvious. Don't got to read too much into that. There was nothing to gain from cutting Tyrod Taylor. It's $5.5 million against the cap this year. So you knew that those two were going to be back. The running back, a little bit of a surprise. I was hoping that Joshua Corbin would have gotten the leg up over Gary Brightwell due to the fact that I thought Corbin looked good. I think what they did here was they prioritized special teams, and you'll see that a lot throughout this video. Brightwell was a contributor on special teams. Of course, he returned kicks last year. That looks like that's going to go more towards Gray, at least from what we saw in the preseason. But Brightwell was a bit banged up. Brightwell's a guy that could contribute on special teams. I think inevitably that's why he got this nod. And if we're being real, your running back 4 is probably not going to see the field, at least as a running back. You're not going to go 4 deep. And if he does, you're going to have injuries to this core. So that's why I think they did what they did. I think Brightwell made this team over Corbin because of special teams. Hopefully Corbin goes unclaimed and we could stash him on the practice squad. We'll see about that. Wide receiver, a little bit of a surprise to many. I'm sure we only went with 6. Like I said, though, I think Beasley's going to make this team. He'll start on the practice squad, and they'll probably call him up early on this year. But they went with Campbell, Hodgins, Hyatt, Wan'Dell, Shepard, and Slayton. The one intriguing name here is Wan'Dell. He made the 53. He will not start on the PUP. Whether or not he's ready to go week 1, that remains to be seen. Didn't play in any of the preseason games. Practiced at a limited capacity. But as it was getting closer and closer, I thought that Wan'Dell was probably going to make the initial 53. We'll see what they do tomorrow in terms of the maneuvering of the roster and whether or not he's ready to go week 1. But definitely encouraging for a guy that came off an Achilles tear last year. Not an Achilles tear, rather, an ACL injury. For him to be back as soon as he is, usually that's a year time for him. Whether or not he'll be fully recovered, we'll see. We all remember that Barkley wasn't quite the same player the year after the injury that he sustained. In terms of the rest of the wide receiving core, Campbell, Hodgins, Shepard, Slayton, Hyatt, all pretty obvious names there, right, in the wide receiving core. It's a deep group, not really top heavy, but certainly a deep group, one of the deeper position groups on this team. I mean, you think about Shepard last year, you could have made an argument he was probably the number 2 wide receiver going into last year, especially after finding out what happened to Kadarius Toney. Suddenly he's like the 5, maybe even he is the 6, actually, when you really look at this wide receiving core. Tight end, Bellinger, Cage, or Waller, the exact 3 that I expected and said. I just think it makes too much sense. I wouldn't be shocked. I think this is the first position that I've talked about so far where I could see the Giants making an ad via waiver or trade leading up into the season. I'd probably not trade, probably waiver as teams cut down. But I could see them going with more of a blocking tight end, whether it be adding them to the practice squad or potentially rostering 4 tight ends week 1. Being that we're playing Dallas, you need all the blocking you could get. I could see a lot of 12 personnel. I've said that. Myrick unfortunately got hurt, but I could see them picking up a tight end like that to be able to substitute into certain games when they feel like they need that extra tight end. And against Dallas and potentially San Francisco, I could see that being the case. So something to keep note of there. I wouldn't be shocked if they pick up a tight end tomorrow. But, of course, they went with Bellinger, Cager, and Waller. The first 2 are obvious. Bellinger should thrive this year in year 2 opposite Waller. A lot of eyes will be on Waller, the best pass catcher in this offense. And Cager just seems like a natural backup for a guy like Waller, a very poor man's Waller, but a similar type of skill set. So I'm not surprised at all that Lawrence Cager made this team. Offensive line. The one surprise here for me was Tyree Phillips not making the team. I thought his tackle guard versatility would carry him over. I think the name here that kind of substituted in for him was Shane Lemieux. I thought all the others were kind of shoo-ins with Bredesen, Azudu, Glowinski, McKeithen being we drafted him last year. Neil Parrott, as of now, is the obvious swing tackle. John Michael Schmitz, and, of course, Andrew Thomas. They ended up choosing Shane Lemieux over Tyree Phillips. The reason being, if I had to guess, the Giants probably felt like they needed more versatility on the interior. Lemieux, of course, is capable of playing both the guard and the center, as he's displayed before in practice. So I think that's why they went that route. We'll see if they make another addition here. This is certainly not finalized. I could see Lemieux getting cut if they were to add a guard or a tackle in free agency. But right now, that's what they decided to go with. And you see some versatility there. McKeithen carries guard tackle flexibility. Same thing for Azudu in terms of the way that he's built. So Bredesen could play the center as well as the guard. So they have some linemen that could do different things. Of course, not the deepest part of this team. You don't go into the year very comfortable knowing that Matt Pearce the swing tackle. I would like to get an upgrade there if possible. We'll see what Joe Shane decides to do. Linebacker. One surprise, I think I'll explain as to why they went this route, but Cam Brown, Carter Coughlin, Micah McFadden, Azeez Ojulari, Bobby Okereke, Isaiah Simmons, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Jihad Ward. The only surprise there for me, and the only guy that I did not have on my initial roster, is Cam Brown. In his place, I had Darian Beavers, who, of course, is a fan favorite of the New York Giants. Rightfully so. He's an exciting player, a hard hitter, a guy that got hurt last year who none of us really got an opportunity to see. I think the reason in the end why he didn't make the team, he's probably not fully recovered. He probably doesn't quite look like himself before the injury last year. He gave it his all. Hopefully we could stash him on the practice squad, much like some of the other players I've talked about. And Cam Brown, the one constant thing you've heard about Cam Brown since he's been a Giant, he's a very good special teams contributor. And I think when you got Simmons, that's what you're thinking with the deep end of these linebackers. You're thinking about guys that could help you on special teams, and Cam Brown thrives in that area. So that's why in the end, I think Cam Brown was rostered by this team. I don't think it's a lock. He makes the team. We could still make some additions. He's kind of on the bubble. Carter Coughlin to me was obvious. He's another versatile player. He could play off the edge, which is what he played in college at Minnesota. The Giants converted him to the middle linebacker as well. So he's versatile. He could do multiple things, and another guy that could contribute on special teams. Micah McFadden, just a natural fit for this defense. It's why we drafted him in the first place, a guy that is known to be a good blitzer up the middle. And, of course, the other guys are obvious with the Simmons, who we're all really excited about, Okereke, Ojulari, Thibodeau, and, of course, Jihad Ward, the veteran. D-line, I had it right. I just didn't think they would also add a sixth in DJ Davidson. But when I think about it, it kind of makes sense. When you really look at this core, you have a guy in, well, first off, Jordan Riley's a 7th-round pick. He's looked really good, but he's still a bit unproven. The same thing with DJ Davidson, who didn't play much last year. But DJ Davidson's main strong suit is the interior, right? The nose tackle, the run stuffer. Well, A'Shawn Robinson is coming off an injury. So it only makes sense to have have as much depth as you possibly can on that defensive line. So they give Davidson another shot, a guy that they drafted last year who's been banged up, for much of training camp. The rest are obvious with Lawrence, obviously A-Sean, Leonard Williams, Jordan Riley, and Nacho. So this is our deepest positional group. And I think the Giants look at the Eagles model and they try to mimic it. And it only makes sense. You want to be as deep as you possibly can here so that you could try to stop the run, something that we were very poor at last year. So they end up going with 6 here. The DB room, they went with 11, which I thought they would, but I actually had 6 corners and I had 5 safeties. They ended up going with 6 safeties and 5 corners. They left the Warrior off the roster, who I initially had on mine. Instead, in his place, they put in Bobby McCain, the veteran safety, which makes sense. It's a young core. The same arguments I made for Warrior, you could make for McCain, a veteran who's played from within the league. We're kind of thin at the safety spot. Obviously, Pinnock looked really good, but you don't know what you're going to get with him. He's never started a full year for a football team at that position. McKinney, of course, going to be the starter day one. Banks and Hawkins look to be the starting exteriors. And, of course, you're going to have a Dory Jackson in the slot. Darnay Holmes, if you've not heard, took a pay reduction, much like Darius Slayton did last year to stay with this team, which is great. I think that's the only way he would have stayed on, like I mentioned in my preview video. So I don't even want to call it a surprise, but the only moderate surprise, I suppose, was they went with 6 safeties and 5 corners. But McLeod's a guy who could kind of do both. And I think I would label this the third position where I could see the New York Giants looking to make an upgrade tomorrow. If I had to guess, the 3 positions I'd point out would be offensive line, whether it's the tackle or on the interior, the tight end, as I said earlier, and potentially a corner. Because right now we're only carrying 5 corners. Holmes is strictly a slot. Flott kind of fits that mold as well. So you don't have a ton of exterior depth there, and they're all very young. When you look at our corners, Deontay Banks is a rookie. Cordell Flott is the same age as Banks. He was only 20 last year. Hawkins is a rookie. Holmes is a guy that's not projected to get a lot of playing time, is still relatively young. I think it's only his 3rd year in the league, maybe his 4th. And Adoree Jackson is the lone vet there. So I could certainly see them picking up a solid corner that may have been dropped from another team. So definitely be on the lookout for that. The special teams, cut and dry with Gano, Gillen, and Kreider. So a couple of minor surprises. Nothing major here, though. Really excited about that Boogie move. I think we really shored up the depth off the edge. That was a major concern. I'd like to see them add maybe a little bit more depth on the O-line if possible, a DB and a tight end. We might not get all of it. We'll see what the New York Giants decide to do. But all in all, you look at this roster last year, when you compare it to this year, the wide receiving core is much better, much deeper. The offensive line, you figure, will be better just with the addition of John Michael Schmitz and the assumed growth of Evan Neal. So you figure it'll be better. How much better will be the major question this season? Tight end, of course, better with the addition of Waller. Quarterback, in my opinion, of course, better. Knowing that Jones is year 2 in this offense, should only get better. The running back core, hopefully Eric Gray continues to grow and build to help out that running back core. As hopefully it's a bit deeper this year, and we can kind of spell Barkley at times. Gray did look good in his last preseason game. The linebacking core, much improved with the addition of Bobby Okereke. We hope Azeez Ojulari stays healthy this year. Isaiah Simmons, just a much better overall group. And much like we said about Neal, you have to assume Kayvon will grow year 2. The D-line, by far, in my opinion, in terms of depth, our most improved unit on this football team. We didn't have any stars. We already had 2 with Leo and, of course, Dex. But you get Davidson back. You had Nacho, Jordan Riley through the draft, and, of course, A-Sean Robinson. And the DB room, I think, overall is better. So it's just a much better, a much deeper team going into year 2 for Joe Schoen. Why? Because he had another year to build with this team. He had free agency. He had a little bit of cap space this year. Last year, he was kind of hamstrung with the previous regime, leaving him in the situation they did with Dave Gettleman. But overall, really like this roster. Really excited to see some of the tinkers that they're going to do tomorrow. I'll probably be live around 6:30-ish. I get home from work around 5:40, probably eat dinner, and then go live around 6:30, 6:40. We'll talk about some of the happenings from around the league as the New York Giants continue to fill out the remainder of their roster. But as always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.